Welcome back to On the Clock, our show about making the moments matter. I'm your host, Elisa Gums. Today, we're chatting about how to level up your networking skills with networking coach Jevonya Allen, the founder of Twisted Networking and author of the new book, The Introverts Guide to Becoming a Master Networker. Jevonya, we're so excited to have you here on the Clock. How are you?
I am doing fantastic, Elisa. I am so glad to be here. Thank you.
I'd love to hear about your background. How did you come to be a networking coach?
Oh, it's so interesting. So I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. When I was 3, my parents took me to Rhode Island to give me, the better life, what they deemed. So I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island. I went to the top high school. I went to the University of Rhode Island. I ended up getting a bachelor's in psych, a master's in education. But then I ended up working home daycare with my mom. I absolutely loved working with my mom. However, when I was introduced to business, I said, I think this is the right journey for me. So 2009, I was introduced to network marketing. And so I got into this network marketing business, and it opened my eyes to personal development. It opened my eyes to networking events. And so I started going to more networking events, and I just absolutely loved the concept. But being an introvert, it was extremely difficult for me. So I had to create my own events that felt comfortable and natural for me. And so it's been since 2017 that I created Twisted Networking, and I've just been hosting networking events in person and virtually. And when I released my book, The Introverts Guide to Becoming a Master Networker, that was when I coined the term networking coach.
So you've said our word of the day now, introvert. And so I'm going to ask you here, because I know a lot of the work that you do is around sort of dispelling the myths around an introvert. So if you'll tell us, what an introvert really is and what it isn't.
Awesome. Yeah. So a lot of people have this misconception that, introverts were shy, that we're unassertive, and that we're quiet. That's the term. And to some people, they think calling us quiet is a compliment, but we're really not quiet at all. The thing about being an introvert is we're very introspective. We spend a lot of time in our head. We have no problem with being alone. A couple of years ago, I decided I was just going to go to Jamaica by myself. My parents thought I was insane. I thought I was insane, but I'm that type of person. I can travel to another country alone and be perfectly fine. Another thing with introverts is we don't need to be the center of attention. We are okay working in the background and getting our job done. We are extremely hard workers. And a lot of people think introverts, we don't like people and that we're antisocial. And that's totally not the case. We just don't like everybody. We are very selective about our circles, and our circles are usually small, and they're usually genuine and authentic. Instead of just having a whole bunch of people, we like to have very intense relationships, but they have to be meaningful, not just frivolous relationships going on. So those are some of the differences. And one of the other major things, Elisa, is the way we manage our energy. So from research, extroverts, they thrive off of energy from other people. And for introverts, other people's energy drains us. And so we need to spend less time in big crowds and more time alone to rejuvenate so that we can be our best selves.
I don't consider myself an introvert necessarily. According to the personality test, I'm pretty close to 50-50, but I do know that I dislike the getting to know you stage with people. So whether it's platonic and you call it making new friends, or it's romantic and it's going on a first date, or it's professional and it's networking, I always just want to skip ahead to the part where I'm already familiar and comfortable with you.
Yes.
So I can totally relate.
Yes.
The premise of the book is that you can become good at networking, not in spite of the fact that you're an introvert, but you can really honor the fact that you're an introvert and even capitalize on it. What do you mean by that?
So I recently had someone read my book, and he said that he's felt that something was wrong with him all of his life because he was an introvert. And so a lot of us, a lot of introverts in the world, we're told that something is wrong with us because we're not the first one to raise our hand. We're not typically voted most likely to succeed. We're not the prominent one in the classroom. So we tend to think that something's wrong with us. However, introverts are some of the best people to have on your team. Introverts, we listen more than we talk. We're very observant. We know what's going on in the world, and we're very in tune to emotions. And so for other introverts, I want them to realize that those are good qualities. Those might be considered soft qualities in society, but those are good qualities to have. And those are the qualities that you need to connect on a genuine level with other people and to build your network.
So you are already a networking coach. Why write a book about networking? Why write it now? And why write it specifically for introverts?
So the pandemic happened, 2020 happened to all of us. Life changed. And my business coach, we were having a conversation one day and he says, you know what, you should write a book. And I'm like, I should do what? Me? I don't write books. I buy books. I read books, but I don't write books. But he said that you should write a book. And that just did something in my head when he said that to me. And so I took it in, internalized it, and thought about it. I said, you know what would I write about? And, I've created Twisted Networking out of thin air, basically. I created this whole system and I'm like, well, let's talk about networking. And I had recently taken some of those personality tests and I found out that I was an introvert. And by the way, the 50-50, you're an ambivert. I love that term because you're right in the middle. I actually say that I've taught myself how to be an ambivert because I can live in both worlds now based on my training. And so when he said that you should write a book, I says, what am I going to write about? How about writing about what's natural to me and what I enjoy? And I know that there's other introverts in business who are having some of the same struggles. So within 2 weeks, I had the name of the book. I'm like, it's a mouthful. The Introvert's Guide to Becoming a Master Networker is a huge, huge title. Big name, like Jevonya is not an easy name, but it just came out. And then within 2 months, I had the manuscript written. It just flowed so effortlessly. And I just took all the things that I learned and I said, let's put it in a book and share it with other people so that they can benefit as well.
The book starts out with a very simple quote, which is that networking is the #1 key to success in life. Yeah. Why is that the case?
Yes. And so that's my quote. Networking is the #1 key to success in this game called life. I believe that everything is about people. Money comes from people. Information comes from people. Thoughts, ideas, everything comes from people. And so if we focus on our network, the people who are around us, then we're going to be successful. Far too often people are focused on chasing money, but they forget that to get money comes from people. So you have to talk to people, you have to connect with people, you have to get to know people. And so for me, everything is based on the relationship and the people who are around me, whether it be business, personal, whatever, it boils down to your circle.
One of the things I learned from your book, and this is something that I don't think I'd ever heard before, is that networking is basically attracting people to you and that it all starts with how you feel about yourself. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. And that's where the personal development piece comes in the book. I think that's the first chapter in the Introvert's Guide to Becoming the Master Networker. So what I learned was the way I felt about myself, I project to the world. That's what happens. And that came from research and that came through analyzing myself, my thoughts, because when I started out, I was in a place that I wasn't happy. I was very uncomfortable with myself. Student loan debt, health was bad relationship. And I'm like, something is wrong. And I understood that in order to build a business, I needed to be able to connect with other people. And if I'm not connected with myself, if I feel uncomfortable, if I feel awkward in the room, if I'm having all these negative thoughts, what am I going to project into the world? And so I said, I have to take a deep dive in myself, do some personal development, figure out how do I make Jevonya happy first. Far too often we're trying to make other people happy and we're not happy. And so I realized that in order to attract people, I had to be attractive. And nobody wants to be in a relationship with someone who is miserable and uncomfortable, whether it's a business or a personal relationship. And so a lot of people, especially introverts, we don't feel comfortable with ourselves. And so in order for us to attract people and people to want to spend time with us, we got to get it together. And it starts up here.
Yeah, I think, when you say it's like an aha moment, the light bulb goes off and it feels like it should be common sense that if you're not comfortable in your own skin, how could you possibly be comfortable out in a networking room? But I don't know that most of us like make that connection.
Exactly.
So if someone finds themselves at that place, what can they do to develop themselves to the point where they're projecting what it is that they want to project?
So when you get to this place where you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I am so uncomfortable, I don't know what's going on, you need to start reading, you need to start studying, doing some research. Google is the best place to start. Figure out how to solve your problem. And especially for people who are moving from a corporate arena to more entrepreneurship, the mindset has to shift when you're trying to build a business. And so my book is basically a business book. When you get to this place where you're like, you know what, 9 to 5 is not necessarily for me, I want to do my own thing, you have to change. It's like moving from one zip code to another, and it requires you to do some personal development. You're going to have to read books. You're going to have to retrain yourself. Especially when you think about our regular education from K through 12, we're taught basically factory work, how to memorize and how to just write things and regurgitate information. But entrepreneurship requires ingenuity, it requires creativity, and you have to tap into a different part of your brain to produce a business. And so the book, The Introverts Guide to Becoming a Master Network, is really designed to help people to tap into that other side of skills so that they can create the dream life.
Let's talk about some of the fears or apprehensions that people have about networking. What are they? And more importantly, how do we overcome them?
Yes. Okay. I know how you said it a little while ago that small talk. Most people do not like the small talk, but the small talk is where it begins. That's the best part. That's where you get to start that relationship. And I know people want to just go from the hello to getting married. It just doesn't work that way. Life does not work that way. So a lot of people, they feel uncomfortable with the small talk. They don't like that. A lot of people don't like to introduce themselves to strangers. That is a big fear of people, walking up to someone and just saying, hey, I'm Jevonya. That is scary to people. Going into a room full of people that you don't know. In the book, I talk about my first experience at a networking event, and it was awful. I had like my first near panic attack. I had to leave the event. It was so overwhelming. And so a lot of people don't want to experience that. And so in the book, it's preparing you so that you can reduce that fear, that anxiety, and so that you're prepared when you go to an event, so you're prepared when you meet new people, and that it becomes comfortable and natural to actually connect with another human being.
And what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen in your time as a networking coach that people make when it comes to networking?
One of the biggest mistakes is that they talk too much. I run into people at networking events and they're so focused on their pitch and they're so focused on selling you something that they don't let you get a word in edgewise. And so for them, it just looks awful. It's like, back up. Back up off me. It's like you go on this date and the guy just talks the whole time. You're like, yeah, I don't want to see you again. So that's one of the biggest mistakes, is that they talk too much. Another mistake is that they're just not prepared. They don't know what they're going to say. And so on one of the chapters, it's called the Powerful Marketing Script. I teach people, this is what you're going to say at the event. This is how you're going to introduce your business. Simple, to the point, and make it powerful. So not knowing what to say, talking too much, and just being awkward. outright awkward. Like sometimes people like, you need to look in the mirror before you go out, make sure your hair is done, make sure you're dressed, make sure you don't have any food in your teeth, prepare yourself and just don't be too awkward. And I know as an introvert, it's uncomfortable. Uncomfortable and awkward are two different things. And so if we're prepared, it's going to be a better time, even though we're afraid. One of my favorite books is called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. You're going to be afraid. It's going to be uncomfortable. Even after several years of hosting networking events, I am still nervous at the beginning of every event. It's just human nature, but you still have to go ahead and just do the thing if you're going to achieve the goals that you want to achieve in life.
I think it's so true when you say that people don't know what they're going to say. Like I think about times that I've been out and, people will ask who you are, what you do. And then at a few they've asked, and what do you want or what do you need? And I'm like, like no one has ever asked me that before. I never thought about that. Like it goes back to the personal development part that you have to be clear about what it is that you're out here doing in the world and what you need from other people as you're talking with them. But I don't think anyone ever taught us that.
That's not what we're taught in school. And I have this freebie that I like to give out, and I call it my top 15 networking questions to ask. But I always tell people who get it, answer those questions for yourself first, because they're really deep dives into who you are, why you do what you do. It's not just, I just go to this job. Some people just go to their job for the paycheck. When you get into entrepreneurship, it can't just be for the money because you're not going to stick around long enough. It has to be something deeper than that. And so I always tell them, answer the questions for yourself. Who is your ideal client? Most people will say, everybody, anybody. And when you say that, you know what that means to people? Nobody. Nobody. So you have to prepare yourself and think about these things. And it does take time. It takes time to get to that point in your business, but my book is designed to help people to speed that process up so that they know exactly what to expect, because we're not taught those things in school.
Let's give people some tips for dealing with some common networking situations. And I'm going to start with what I think everyone is most afraid of, which is the dreaded networking event. So what are your best tips when people have to walk into a room full of strangers?
All right. So if you don't like to go out by yourself, the first tip would be to find you a networking buddy. Find somebody. They could be in your industry. They could be someone who is just totally different, a friend. Take somebody along with you so that you're not alone. Prior to going to an event, do some research on it. Find out who's going to be there. Find out what the environment is like. There's different types of events out there. So the more that you do the research ahead of time, you'll know what to expect. And that's one of the reasons why I also created Twisted Networking. We host intimate, small size networking events so that you don't ever have to walk into this room of 100 people and feel like a fish out of water and look crazy. I keep it very small and intimate, so you can always look up Twisted Networking and come visit us. But also just to know what you're going to say, know that it's going to be uncomfortable, know that you're going to sweat, know that you're going to be nervous. But once you get in there and you have that first conversation, that level of anxiety is going to subside. But you just have to go out and go ahead and do it. And just know that it's going to be scary at first.
You also include a whole chapter on social media in the book, which is so essential because for 2 years, none of us went to a single networking event, and practically every connection we had was virtual. So what are your tips for networking over social media?
I absolutely love social media, especially for introverts, because we're good at writing. We express ourselves better that way. We don't necessarily like to do these videos and these reels and these TikToks and stuff. We're not into that, but we can talk to people. We're very observant. So we're scrolling and we're looking and we're learning about people. And so I recommend for people, I know a lot of people don't like social media, but if you're in business, you have to have an account. You have to pick one platform that you feel like you can learn somehow and feel comfortable on. Do you have to post every day? Do you have to let everybody in your business? No. But if you're building a business, you're going to have to let them see something. Because people want to buy from you. They want to get to know you. They want to like and trust you. So I just think social media, like you said, everybody's there. That's where your clients are. We're not putting up billboards on the highway anymore. We're just not doing that too often. And so if you're going to build a business, if you're going to build a network, social media is where your people are. And you can just connect with them on a different level. And so that's probably one of my favorite chapters in the book. I love Facebook. That's just where I started at in college. I remember when Facebook was only for college students. Let me stop aging myself here, but yes, it was only for college students at one point in time. And so that's where I'm most comfortable. I showcase a little bit about my personality. I share about my business. I interact with my friends, and social media just lets people get a glimpse into the personal side of you and the professional side.
You also address one-on-ones in the book, and I've been doing a lot of one-on-ones for work and hadn't even really thought of it as networking. I was just like, I need to meet with these people, so I'm meeting with them. And then when I saw your book, I was like, oh, like you could have a whole intentional
Yes.
strategy around networking based on that if you don't like being in a room full of strangers. So tell us about
Yes.
that.
So the networking event is the introduction. So you'll meet someone at a networking event, and it's kind of like you just meet a bunch of people. But the one-on-one takes that introduction to a deeper level. You get to sit down and look someone eye to eye, and it's just you two there. There's not all that social pressure. You get to know each other. You get to ask more questions, and it just humanizes the relationship. And so the one-on-one to me it's the next step in the networking process. And I'm glad that you came to that realization, because a lot of people don't realize that they're already networking. They're just not as intentional about it as they could or should be. And when you go into those one-on-ones, there's questions that you can ask to get to know a person better. There are things that you can say or how you say it to deepen the relationship a little bit more. And when you're one-on-one, people are more open to share what they know.
Yeah, I definitely found that to be true. That the connections feel much easier for me. They feel a lot more genuine and authentic when you're able to sit down with someone one on one. Or even during the pandemic, I went back to doing
Oh,
phone
nice.
interviews, and I'm like, nobody's done a phone interview for forever, but people are so self conscious. Like in a video interview on Zoom, they're distracted by looking at their own
Yes.
face. And over the phone, people tend to relax and open up much, much more. So there are definitely ways for introverts to take advantage of those
Yes.
things. Before we wrap, is there anything else you want people out there to know, especially anyone who may be struggling still with networking?
I want them to know that it's okay to struggle. It's it's a hard thing for people. Relationships are difficult, and a lot of it goes back. It could go back to childhood trauma. It could go back to bullying. It could go back to a lot of things that make relationships difficult. And so it's okay if you're struggling, but you don't have to stay there. There's solutions, like the Introvert's Guide to Becoming a Master Networker is a solution to help you get from where you are to where you want to be. There's a lot of people who want to live these magnificent lives. They have their dreams, but they're stuck and they don't know how to get out of there. There are people who will help you. There are business coaches like myself. There are books out there. I give a list of books in the back of my book of resources that you can read, but you're going to have to read and save yourself. You're going to read, you're going to listen, you're going to retrain your own brain. I remember I would tell myself that I have to raise little Jevonya. That's what I'm doing. Sometimes I have to raise myself to be this entrepreneurial woman. And so sometimes you're going to have to raise yourself to be that other person that you wish to be.
And the book is chock full of helpful tips. We're not going to give them all away because we want you all to go and read the Introvert's Guide to Becoming a Master Networker. But I will tell you, since I have been through it, she's got tips about smiling and giving compliments and all kinds of nuts and bolts things that will help you. This has been so helpful. Thank you so much, Jevonya, for
Thank
sharing the
you.
unique ways that you're helping people make the most of the time we've been given. And thank you all for watching On the Clock. We'll see you next time as we continue to talk about working with purpose and living with passion.